Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
好的了，明明节王八蛋，也进了这些说这把那商业所了，这些对于把这他的一些还给他们的那些个冲碰他的没给那个，说估计那个是把他们这个都大概确定的。身边事情是个人的不，也这些东西啊，先别说一些要是听他们外都见着呀，那么的差个的。人家不是别的，特别说的，你那么就路什么状的，经过现在不等着吧，用这那么远吧，这了的。谢谢好了，也不行，我的现在我都就这样了吧，也外头么可能现在吧，个有人不是老想着，半年多就想话就跟说那么干嘛吧，因为我研究的是一边一等的嘛，吃点东西，我就去想别的怎么着了。那就直接给别人那没东西用我让这谢谢说的那么就从那东西给个就是别买点就了，个真是不要管了就是。古松多烟雾着啥都是，嗯，咋的了呀？拿到吗？呃，你看咱的看了不起，不敢看了不起，进阶上看了不起，这是来选因。
Yesterday, I saw Bogart Kenner-Boucher. So touched it to Kenner-Boucher. I saw all the Kempos and Geshes. The nuns from the Shedar, foremost among the Sangha, and as well as all the Dharma friends who are watching over the webcast. First of all, I'd like to mention yesterday, I thought I would like to. I should speak about Miki Dorje's birthplace and birth region, so I didn't really uh, prepare well enough for them. So maybe I'll tell them about it. So actually, this year's teaching in future years. So I think it's better to take the time and to try to say as much as I can rather than trying to push through and say that I have to say this, I have to teach this today and that today, tomorrow, and that tomorrow. And at first I thought I had to make a schedule for myself like that, but when we're actually doing this, it doesn't really work. And so I just try to say as much as I can. When these autobiographies say this, and I'm unable to make a schedule that I'm going to teach this, what order I'm going to teach everything in. And so I please speak about today is, as I announced yesterday, will praise the good deeds. The second of the good deeds is, in terms of the subject, is abandoning the gurus and companions or following them along the paths they taught. I did all I could to overcome the thoughts of the three poisons, impediments to reaching the Dharma's culmination. I think of this as one of my good deeds. Is that is the first of the good deeds that was taught. Mikyo Dorje talked about how he entered the teaching of the Dharma and began to practice the Dharma. And so the second of these is that when we are practicing Dharma, there are many internal and external impediments and harmful conditions. And among them, is that if you follow negative friends, then many difficulties will happen. So how this is teaching how Mikyo Dorje overcame the impediments to practicing the Dharma, in particular the negative friends. And so that is the main topic of this verse. Oh, no, I need to hide that for a little bit. I'm not supposed to show that yet. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, the Karmapa Mikyo Dorje, he did so many amazing things that people could see, that people immediately felt great faith and respect for him as the reincarnation of the Karmapa. Also, Situtashi Paljor looked at the testament left by the previous Karmapa, and to a great degree accepted that he was the Karmapa's and instructed people to respect him as the Chulku. But one disappointing thing that happened at that point is that Sitatashi Paljor passed away soon after the Karmapa was born. And so for that reason, Siddhartha Rinpoche was not able to continue working towards the recognition of him as the Tulku. And so after that, they went to Ryuchi, and the master of Ryuchi, Jigten Woncho, showed him great respect. And said that there's no mistake to recognize him as the reincarnation. And at that point in time, there was a Hlorong. It was called Hlorong community, or the Hlorong Nangzong. So he's basically the leader of Hlorong. And he said that he's the reincarnation, so you need to take good care of him. And the Hlorong community accepted this and agreed. And they invited him to the Hlorong monastery and said that they would provide well for him in terms of food and clothing and so forth. But if we, in actuality, but there's an autobiography of Magaduja that he wrote while he was at the Namtu mountain.
오, 생겨도 생겨도
Hear me?
차지 않나.
Can you raise your hands? Oh, yeah. So once again, my computer died. Just one moment, please. There's an autobiographical liberation story that he wrote in Namtu Mountain, and what it says in there is that the people from Lorong said they would take good care of him, but then actually when he reached Lorong, then he gave they treated him like someone who herds the horses or donkeys or dogs. They didn't give him any more than they would have given to such herdsmen. And then in addition, the Garshan had said that the Chulku was someone else. And they said that the Western Tulku was the reincarnation of the seventh Karmapa Chudak and they just completely disregarded Mikyu Dorje, and they didn't take care of him. And so for that reason, and until he reached the age of 7, he and his entire family were reduced to living as beggars in the region of Lurung. And they had a lot of difficulties because they didn't get any food or clothing. And so from the very beginning, that's one difficulty that he faced before he was even recognized as the Karmapa. So in that time, even though Mikyu Dorje had such great signs and wondrous things, but they didn't recognize him, and they listened to the audacious Amdo Lama, and they started taking care of the Western Tulku. Is it those? And saying that was they were just about to recognize him as the Tulku as Chudikjasa. Now, the reason why these situations happened at base is that at that time, as Chudikjasa had passed away, and because he had passed away, his region was Jasa Tashinanjal. Jasa Tashinanjal was. And so Chudikjasa had said officially that was not recognized as a region of the seventh. And so the seventh Karmapa had passed away, and so the encampment, he was the highest Lama, he had the highest rank, and that was Gyaltsab Rinpoche. So naturally, Gyaltsab Rinpoche had to act as the regent of the seventh Karmapa Chudikjasa. And so for that reason, the people in the encampment didn't really listen to him. Not only didn't they listen to Gyaltsab Rinpoche, during the time of there was a very strict regime and strict rules for the encampment during the time of the seventh Chudikjasa. And beer and meat were not even allowed to be brought inside the encampment. And if a woman had to come into the encampment, she could not spend more than a day. She could only be there during the daytime. And so all of these rules are just completely lost. In addition to that, Gyaltsab Rinpoche they criticized Gyaltsab Rinpoche quite a lot. And in the end, there was someone from Karma Monastery named Drumtashipa Dundrup who passed away, and they said that Gyaltsab Rinpoche had given him poison, and so they made it difficult for Gyaltsab Rinpoche to stay, and so he, for a time, had to go to the area of Jiang. Now, the seventh Karmapa Gyatso had many great students. There were many great students of the seventh Karmapa Gyatso, but the monks in the encampment wouldn't pay any respect to them. But for example, with Nyempa Rinpoche, Nyempa Rinpoche later became the most important for him. Later they said he was a bad person. He's a charlatan. There's a Drumtashi Wezir. He also became a teacher of Mikya Jidor, and they said he's a weak person. He has no power. They disregarded him. They didn't consider him to be anything. Then there was, they said that Nachusi, the Lord of Dharma, Kama Chindape, was very well versed in both Dharma and in politics, and they had a little bit of faith for him. But he didn't get any opportunity to come to the empowerment and say that one should do this or that. They didn't give him any power. And so likewise, now also when they were appointing a teacher or tutor for Mikya Dorji, someone who was worthy of being the tutor and who really should have been appointed appointed as tutor. That person was Shama Chura Chenga Chura. But the people in the empowerment said that he broke his samaya with the previous karma. And so if his shadow even falls on you, you'll go to hell. And so even when Mikya Dorje invited Chenga Chogitapa, the people in the encampment wouldn't even allow the Shama and the Karmapa to meet. And so because the reason why they thought so badly of Shama Rinpoche, but there are many reasons probably, but one main reason is that at that time, the Shama Rinpoche had gone to Patu Chintu and had become very powerfully, both dharmically and politically. And so the members in the encampment envied him, and that is probably why they did not like him. I think that is the main reason. And so when the Shama Rinpoche didn't allow him to have Shadvitsinu, and so the big people in the encampment, and they had a discussion. They thought about who would be the most important, who would be the best person to be the tutor for that would be Drumtashipa Dundrup. So that's Drumtashi. So they invited him to the. They were bringing him to the encampment when just before he arrived at the encampment, he vomited blood and died. And so what they didn't work out as they wished. And all of the things that had been present, and so there was the wife of Tashi Dundrup, and his students had taken all of the sacred objects from the seventh Karmapa, and they took control of them. So basically, the whole point is that. So actually, all of the sacred objects, all the powers. So everything had been so it had fallen to the power of this woman. And so instead of keeping the good Dharma rules, they didn't even wear their monastic robes in the encampment. And wherever the encampment went, there would be about they'd take about 20 tents of beggars along with them. Now, earlier the great encampment had the sangha of the early encampment had basically all really deteriorated, and all of the animals, the goats and sheep that had been offered them, were all killed, and they had either feasted on the meat. Now, Chudagyatso had passed away, and so they should have built some sort of a stupa for his relics, in particular for what happened for Chudagyatso when his corpse, when his remains were cremated. There were they had in each of his what was a miracle that happened is that in each of his spine, the vertebrae, there was an image of Avalokiteshvara, and these should have been, and they later they were put in a stupa. Now later Mikya Dorje said that they should be placed in a place where everyone could see them, but they were not. So all these sacred objects and sacred relics, and there was no one making offerings or taking care of them. And so it was really a very bad situation. Later, Gyatso Rinpoche returned from the region of Zhang, and he built reliquaries for the remains of Chudagyatso. And he recognized Mikya Dorje, the Eastern Chuluku, as the Karmapa. And it turned out well, but he suddenly fell ill and passed away. Not only did he pass away, they took his remains. No one took care of it. They didn't know how to take it, or they took it and they buried it in sand. And when they buried it in the sand, then within the sand later, there are many different there are many ring cells like the size of mustard seeds. So when Gyatso Rinpoche suddenly died and passed away, people said that he passed away and died so suddenly because someone had given him poisonous. And so probably the reason why they hid his body in sand is because they thought that he had been poisoned. So they buried his. So I think that they must have buried his remains in the sand for that reasons. So when these really depressing situations and really revolting situations happen, are not written in many of the older and the new documents, but liberation stories. But later, Mikya Dorje wrote a letter criticizing the encampment, or scolding them. And in that letter, it explains these events in great detail. But that letter is no longer available, extant. But the way we know that it's there is that during the time of the 13th Karmapa, a student of us called Negowa Karma Shenpen Gyatso wrote a liberation stories of six of the Kamsam gurus and students, and because of that, we know that these events occurred. Likewise, in the autobiography of the fifth Dalai Lama, it is mentioned in brief that such events happened. But in the past, if when you only see the fifth Dalai Lama thing, we think probably the Dalai Lama said just made this up because or just wrote that could this have happened so badly? We wouldn't have really believed it. But later, when I saw the than the autobiography, or the lives and stories of the Karma Kansen and by Negoa, and saying, "Oh, what the great fifth said, is probably true, and I had certainty in that." Likewise, in the commentary on the good deeds by Sanjay Paldrup, he describes many such events that were similar. And the reason I'm explaining these is that the commentary by on the good deeds, as I mentioned yesterday or the other day, is published by the Vajravidya by the Vajravidya library. Now, this edition was based on as I mentioned before, was for the manuscript that came from the Drepung library. And when we were translating the good deeds into English and Chinese, and proofreading this, and while doing during that period, I found another manuscript for the good deeds. I think this is like a good coincidence, good interest. Prior to that, we hadn't noted it, but it's just happened. Sometimes they just arrive. And so I received another manuscript of the good deeds. And now when we compare the two editions, that new one and the previous one that we already had, sometimes there are even a couple lines or a couple of pages that are just different. I think that if you put the two together, the ones that, if we have the printed text that we have, what is lacking there, if we could fill it in with from what's in the new edition. In particular, the old manuscript that we found, what it's written in the end of that one. This commentary on the liberation story was written by Sanjay Paldrup himself, and then he offered it to Mikyo Dorje to see it, and Mikyo Dorje Mikyo Dorje instructed him what to delete and what to add. And so for that reason, that liberation story that we have just found, in this manuscript that we have just found, is an important text and an important source for us. And what it says in that one is that when Mikyo Dorje was young, most of the attendants in his retinue would say that we're doing a Gana Chakra, and they'd always be eating like an entire sheep. And so in saying it was they made plan to this. And the Mikyo Dorje said that this is calling eating the flesh and blood of these weak animals, and calling it Ganachaka has no benefit and is very dangerous, so it's better not to do it. And so he did not allow them to do it. And then one day, in the encampment, there was a brick of tea. This is like, so that's a tea ripping they put a brick inside the 5 or 6 bricks of tea in a package of bamboo, and one of these was lost. When it was lost, someone said, they brought someone who had no agent, and it said, "Oh, he stood in." They put him, and they put them in the encampment's prison. And when not only did they put him in the encampment, the attendants, they asked him, so you need to say that he is as if you need to say that he is a thief, as if you say it with clairvoyant. And if you don't do that, then people are going to we're going to punish you. They're going to bid him. It's like they threatened him. You need to say this. If you don't, we're gonna get you. You're going to be hard for you. But Mika Dorje, what he said was, Mika Dorje knew he was not the thief. So I don't know whether he's the thief, but if you can do what you do, it's fine. But I'm not going to lie. Later, they found it became very clear that that person was not the thief. And so it meant that he had many such negative friends, but he didn't come under their influence. And he always spoke true words and the truth. And later there were also if this intendant said if there's someone who had a good thing, they said they think they try to find a way. They said to Mika Dorje, "Oh, you should find a way to get that thing from him." And they'd speak to him, and they asked him to do this often. But Mika Dorje said, if they give it out of their faith, that's fine. But if I were to be deceptive and give them, then that is taking without giving, and that's not okay, he said. So in brief, sometimes the people that say you need to butter up, the people who are going to offer them that you need to do many different things, do things to try to accumulate wealth. Many people said this, but he didn't come under the influence, and he stood on his own two feet, and he was not influenced. Also people would say, this monastery in this region are, so please wage war on them. Please do cast spells on them. Many people said this, asked him to do this many times. But he said, I don't even know how to do it. He had no intention to do that. He did not know how to do it in practice. And so, likewise, when he was doing the Mahakala practice and so forth, and people would say, we're offering this to Mika Dorje, and then they'd say we're making an offering to Bernard, and they'd bring a lot of beer and meat, and they'd eat as much beer as eat as much meat as they could, and eat as much drink as much beer as they could while during the Ganachakra, and say there's a Ganachakra. But basically what we need is we need to have faith and samaya. And so if you have to have faith in this, and if you practice in it, if you do this in a way that if you do it in a way that is accord with faith and samaya, then the Dharmakaya is fine. But if they enjoy it when you do misdeed, then they're not a Dharma protector. They're a misdeed protector. Actually, when you do unvirtuous actions such as casting sorcery and curses on others, then if you if you ask the Dharma practitioners to do that, in the end, the ruin will fall on you. And so to do the practice is in Dhammas, and in your mouth you're saying that you're making oblations to the monastery. If it's better to stop doing that entirely. And so in this way, in order to harm other sentient beings, to make orders to the Dharma practice or to encourage the activity, he wouldn't allow these to occur at all. Also, some people in his presence, and he said this is the old custom. They pretend to have a lot of pure intention and pure affection. They say you're the Karmapa, and since you're the Karmapa, the previous Karmapas were very famous, and so you should also be like the previous Karmapas, they would say. And then they would try to do things to make his name well known. And at that time, he was one of the greatest lamas in Tibet, and so for that reason. And so they should tell him you should act in this way, act like a big person in this way. And they would teach him how to speak in very pompous and impressive ways. And so you need to make they told him that he needed to make plans for the future in such a certain way. And we need to think about ways to support our own Kaji Kama tradition. And so there are many people who had and to take a partisan approach. So many people advised him to do this. Now, what Mika Dorje said about this later is, from the time I was a little child until very now, many people have come to me saying I should do non-dharmic things. I've had many people who've come to teach me the eight worldly dharmas, people who have come to teach me the 8 concerns. If I had done as they said, I could have put it in practice, but this human life is just a moment. It's very short. So this human life is so short. So if I did that and then practice, then there wouldn't have time to practice the Dharma. So I've forgotten about those. And I chose to do Dharma instead. And so for that reason, he himself gave up non-dharmic acts. And if people would listen, he would tell them, he would encourage them to give up non-dharmic actions. Yeah, but for other people, for the evil people, who would just be indifferent towards them or equanimous towards them. So generally, their opinions. When people they talk about it, I don't think. Sometimes I think, and he said he had like and so he said that whenever people would say that people should do this, that he'd feel unbearable compassion for these people. So basically, Mika Dorje's character was that. When he saw other people doing misdeeds and unvirtuous actions, or people who were in suffering, when he actually saw this, or when he heard about these situations, or when he heard news about some difficult situation in another place, or that there's this sort of suffering, or that people are acting this place, and when he would merely hear about this, he would be unable to bear this. Not only could he not bear it, but it often made him sick to think about it. And the attendants in his retinue would criticize each other. And the Dharma practitioners would try to point out each other's faults. And they would criticize the great masters. And so the people who came telling about these came to tell Mika Dorje about this officer, and when he wrote this, and sometimes people would say that, and sometimes he would, at that time he would kind of last. If he had said this and not okay to say this, if he had immediately say this, then they would. And he laughed, and so if he hadn't laughed at them, and told them don't do this, they would get they would have they would have not said anything to him. They would have clammed up. And so, and he said, but at the end, he said, but in the end, later when he would feel that he would go to. So you think that there's no way to get them to look inside it. So he looked and stuff. And so when they're looking only at the faults, so the great people such as Sanjay Nyingpa Rinpoche and they go to see what they can say in front of other great beings. They can say whatever they can say, whatever they can do to proclaim these things in front of many people. And so this is really just so kind of he's realized this is a crazy way of acting, and he was just and he could not bear this, and so he often wrote about this. So at this point, to give an example, I thought, but first of all, first we'll have our break, and then I will continue after we reconvene.